She had been planning her exit for 8 months, smiling at his face. He found out from under the kitchen sink. That was her very big mistake.
My name is Gerald Wade Hutchins, and I have always believed that a man's home is not built from bricks and drywall. It is built from trust. I spent 11 years constructing mine, board by board, sacrifice by sacrifice, until the morning I lay flat on my back underneath the kitchen sink, wrench in hand, listening to my entire life get quietly dismantled above my head. We were in the middle of a full kitchen floor renovation. I had taken the week off from running our business, a mid-sized commercial cleaning company I co-owned with my wife, Sandra, specifically to handle the labor myself. Sandra knew I was working on the plumbing connections beneath the cabinetry before laying the new tile, or so I thought she remembered. The way she walked into that kitchen and started talking to her sister on speakerphone told me she had forgotten I was even in the house. I heard her open the refrigerator. I heard the familiar clink of ice dropping into a glass. And then I heard her voice, casual and unbothered, like she was discussing the weather. She said the promotion goes through the 30th, so I'm thinking I wait until after that. That gives me a solid salary to fall back on immediately. Her sister's voice crackled through the phone speaker. And the accounts? Already been quietly moving the client contacts to a personal folder. The Beaumont account, the Hargrove Hotels contract, the Stonebridge Group, those three alone generate almost 60% of our annual revenue. Once I have them tied to my new business email, there's nothing he can do. They know me. They've always dealt with me directly. I stopped breathing. My hand was still gripping the wrench. The cold of the tile floor beneath me pressed through my shirt. I became completely still, not because I was being strategic, not yet, but because my body simply refused to move. My mind was trying to process what my ears were delivering, and the two systems had temporarily gone offline together. "Do you feel bad at all?" her sister asked. There was a pause. I counted 3 full seconds inside that silence. "I feel relieved," Sandra said. "I've been planning this for 8 months. At this point, I just want it to be over. 8 months. I turned the number over in my mind like a stone. 8 months ago, we had taken a weekend trip to Savannah together. She had laughed the entire drive down. We had eaten shrimp and grits on a porch overlooking the river, and she had reached across the table and held my hand and said she was grateful for me. 8 months ago. Her sister asked whether I had any idea. Sandra laughed, not cruelly, but casually, which was somehow worse. "None. He trusts me completely. That's always been his problem." I want to tell you that I felt rage in that moment. And I did. But beneath it was something quieter and more devastating. It was the specific grief of realizing you have been living inside a story that someone else had already ended. That while you were showing up, working, planning, believing, the other person had already written the final chapter and was simply waiting for the right moment to hand it to you. I did not make a sound. I lay under that sink for another 45 minutes after she left the kitchen, completing every single connection with the precision of a man who had nothing left to prove to anyone but himself. When I finally slid out from beneath the cabinet and stood up, I washed my hands, picked up my tools, and continued laying tile. She came home that evening to a spotless kitchen with gleaming new floors. "Oh wow," she said, genuinely impressed. "You finished the whole thing?" "Every inch," I said. She kissed me on the cheek. I let her. That night I lay beside her in the dark and I made a decision. Not out of revenge, at least not entirely. Out of something more considered than that. I had built this business from a single industrial van and a borrowed pressure washer. I had cold-called every account we ever landed. I had driven through ice storms to honor contracts when we were short-staffed. Sandra was exceptional at client relations, and I had always given her that credit freely. But she seemed to have forgotten something critical. She knew the clients. I knew the infrastructure, the contracts, the vendors, the employees, the insurance carriers, the banking relationships, and every legal document that had ever been filed under the name of Hutchins Premier Services, LLC. She was planning to walk out the door with the fruit. She had forgotten that I owned the tree. I had 5 days before she would begin making her final moves. 5 days to be completely invisible while I rebuilt everything she thought she was about to take. I got up before dawn the next morning, made coffee, and sat down at my desk. I did not call a lawyer first, I called my accountant. My accountant is a man named Clifford Baines, and he has known me since before Sandra ever entered the picture. I had him on the phone by 6:15 that first morning, speaking in the measured tone of a man who had already moved past emotion and into execution. "I need a full audit of every business account, every client contract, and every registered asset under the company name," I told him, quietly. "Nothing moves, nothing gets flagged, and nobody outside this conversation knows we are doing this." Clifford asked no unnecessary questions. That is why I have kept him for 12 years. By that same afternoon, I had also placed a call to our business attorney, Raymond Osei, who pulled up our partnership agreement within the hour. What Sandra had apparently forgotten, or never bothered to fully read, was the clause we had signed during our second year of operation, long before the company had grown into what it was now. The clause stated clearly that client accounts developed using company resources, company time, and company infrastructure remained assets of the LLC, not of either individual partner. Moving client contacts to a personal folder did not transfer ownership. It transferred nothing. Legally, she would be walking out with names on a list and the illusion of leverage. The Beaumont account had a signed service agreement running through the following March. Hargrove Hotels was locked into a 2-year contract with an early termination penalty. The Stonebridge Group had been onboarded through a vendor portal that lived entirely on our company's servers, which I administered. Sandra could email them from a personal account all she wanted. She could not override a binding contract. I said nothing to her, not a syllable. For 5 days, I was the most present and attentive version of myself that I had been in years. I cooked dinner twice. I asked about her workday with genuine-seeming curiosity, and listened while she told me about the promotion timeline, smiling across from her at the table, watching her believe that everything was proceeding exactly as she had planned. There is a specific kind of clarity that comes from knowing something that someone does not know you know. It removes all the noise. You see everything. On the 4th day, I quietly opened a new sole proprietorship under a slightly restructured business name, transferred my personal vendor relationships, the ones built on my individual reputation with our supply partners, and began the process of formally notifying our business bank of a pending ownership restructuring. I did this on the advice of Raymond, carefully within every boundary the law allowed. On the morning of the 5th day, I had one final conversation with Clifford, reviewed everything he had prepared, and then I sat in my home office and drafted a single email. It went to Sandra's work address with Raymond copied. It was not angry. It contained no accusations. It was 4 paragraphs of precise legal language informing her that I was aware of her intentions regarding the business, that I had taken appropriate steps to protect the company's contractual assets, and that any attempt to redirect client accounts or remove proprietary contact data from company systems would constitute a breach of our partnership agreement and potentially expose her to civil liability. I sent it at 9:17 in the morning. By 9:41, she was standing in the doorway of my office. She had clearly read it twice, maybe 3 times, because her face carried that particular expression of someone trying to find the angle they had missed. Her mouth opened, then closed. I watched her cycle through 3 different versions of a response before she landed on the one she chose. "We need to talk," she said. "We do," I agreed and gestured to the chair across from my desk. My desk. In the home we had shared for 9 years, which I should mention was also titled in my name alone, purchased 3 years before our marriage with an inheritance from my grandfather. She sat down, and then something happened that I had not entirely anticipated. She started to cry. Not the theatrical kind, the small, collapsing kind, the kind that looks like a person realizing the distance between where they are and where they thought they would be. "How long have you known?" she asked. "Long enough," I said. I will not pretend the conversation that followed was simple. It lasted nearly 2 hours, and there were moments in it that were painful in ways I had not prepared for, because no matter what Sandra had planned, she was still the woman I had loved for more than a decade. And grief does not follow a clean schedule. She admitted everything. The planning, the timeline, the accounts, the promotion. She admitted she had convinced herself I would be fine, that the business would survive, that I was capable enough to rebuild, as though the calculation of my resilience was a sufficient substitute for honesty. What she had not calculated was that I was capable enough to act before she did. The promotion came through on the 30th, exactly as she had expected. She accepted it. She also received that same week a formal legal notice from Raymond's office outlining the terms under which the business partnership would be dissolved, terms that were, by the language of our original agreement, largely favorable to me. She did not get the Beaumont account, or Hargrove Hotels, or Stonebridge. She got her salary, her personal savings, and the hard education of learning that quiet men are not always idle ones. I kept the business. I restructured it, hired a sharp operations manager, and within 8 months had replaced every dollar of revenue I had briefly feared losing. My name is Gerald Wade Hutchins, and I built this company once from nothing. Turns out the second time is considerably faster.
He never begged. He never ever raised his voice at her. He simply knew more than what she thought, and definitely that's what made a difference.